Jai Hind everyone. I am Dublish, faculty of MC department in Akgec Engineering College, Ghaziabad. Today I am going to deliver a lecture on web technology, and topic of today's lecture is Spring Framework. The Spring Framework is very important topic for your placement purpose and for your examination purpose. So the target audience for this lecture is all MC and BTech CSIT students. So before starting Spring Framework, first we will should understand what is Spring Framework. So the Spring Framework is an application framework and inversion of control container for the Java platform. And the framework core features can be used by any Java applications, but there are extensions for building web application on top of the Java Enterprise Edition platform. So basically, Spring Framework is an open source Java platform that provides comprehensive infrastructure support for developing robust Java application very easily and very rapidly. So the Spring Framework was initially written by Rod Johnson and was released under the Apache 2.0 license in June 2003. Why should we learn Spring? So Spring is the most popular application development framework for enterprise Java. Millions of developers around the world use Spring Framework to create high-performing, easily testable and reusable code. So Spring Framework is an open source Java platform, and the core feature of Spring Framework can be used in developing any Java application, but they are an extension for building web application on the top of the Java Enterprise Edition platform. And the Spring Framework target to make J2 Enterprise Edition development easier to use and promote good programming practice by enabling a Puzo-based programming model. Now, this is the Spring Framework architecture. In this, we have data access integration we can use JDBC, ORM, and JMS transaction. And for remoting, we use WebServkit, Servlet, and Portlet. Firstly, we will have test, then we have core container. In core container, we have AOP, aspect-oriented programming, aspects, information, and messaging. And in core container, we have beans, code, context, and spell. So, Spring could potentially be a one-stop shop for all your enterprise application. However, Spring is modular, allowing you to pick and choose which modules are applicable to you, and without having to bring in the rest. So the following section provide details about all the modules available in the Spring Framework. And the Spring Framework provide about 20 modules which can be used based on any application requirement. So first we have core container. So the core container consists of the core, beans, context, and expression language modules. So and the details of which are given below. So the core module provide the fundamental part of the framework, including the inversion of control and dependency injection feature. And the bean module provide bean factory, which is a sophisticated implementation of the factory pattern. And the context module builds on the solid base provided by the core and beans modules, and it is a medium to access any object defined and configured. So the application context interface is the focal point of the context module. And the last SPAL module provide a powerful expression language for querying and manipulating an object graph at a runtime. So this basically about for the core container. Next we have data access, or we can say data integration. So the data access integration layer consists of the JDBC, ORM, OXM, and JMS and transaction module, which detail I am going to tell you. So the JDBC module provide a JDBC abstraction layer that removes the need for tedious JDBC related coding. The ORM, which is object relational mapping modules, provide integration layer for popular object relational mapping APIs, including JPA, JDO, Hibernate, and IBTs. Next, the OXM module provide an abstraction layer that support object XML mapping implementation for JXB, Kster, XML Beans, JIBix, and Xstream. And the Java Messaging Service JMS module contain feature for producing and consuming messages. And the transaction module support programmatic and declarative transaction management for classes that implement special interfaces and for all your modules. So this is all about the data access. Next layer was web. So the web layer consists of the web MVC, WebSocket, and web portlet modules. So the web module provide basic web-oriented integration features such as multi-part file upload functionality and the initialization of the IOC container using servlet listener and a web-oriented application context. So the WebMVC module contain Spring Model View Controller, implementation of Fora, web application, and the web socket module provides support for WebSocket based two-way communication between the client and the server in web application. So the web portlet module provide the MVC implementation to be used in a portlet environment and mirrors the functionality of a web servlet module. So some miscellaneous thing we have in web framework are AOP, aspects, instrumentation, web and text module. So AOP module basically provide an aspect oriented programming implementation. It's allow us to define method interceptors and pointouts to cleanly decouple code that implement functionality and that should be separated. Moving on, the aspect module provide integration with Aspect-J, which is again a powerful and mature AOP framework. So the instrumentation module provide class instrumentation support and class loader implementation to be used in certain application server. Now the messaging module provide support for STOMP as the WebSocket protocol to use in the application. Also, it also support an annotation programming model for routing and processing STOMP message from WebSocket clients. Last, the test module. It support the test module support the testing of Spring component with the JUnit or TestNG framework. Now, the important question: what are the feature of Spring framework? So, the feature of Spring framework such as IOC, AOP, and transaction management make it unique among all the list of this framework. So some of the important feature of Spring framework are like IOC, Data Access Net framework, Spring Test Context framework, Spring MVC framework, transaction management, Spring Web Services, JDBC abstraction layer. Now, the first is IOC. In IOC, we have first one is bean factory and second one is application context. So the IOC container is a framework for implementing automatic dependency injection very effectively. It manages the complete object creation and its lifetime, as well as it also injects the dependency into the classes. So the IOC pattern to implicitly provide an object reference in a class during runtime, and this pattern acts as an alternative to the service locator pattern. So the IOC container contains assembler code that handles the configuration management of application object. Now the Spring framework provides two packages, namely org.springframework.beans and org.springframework.context, which help in proving the functionality of the IOC container. Data Access framework allows the developers to use persistent APIs such as JDBC and Hibernate. And for storing persistent data in the database, it helps in solving various problems of developer, such as how to interact with the database connection, how to make sure that the connection is closed, or we can say how to deal with the expectation and how to implement transaction management. Also, it enables the developer to easily write code to access the persistent data throughout the application. Next one, Spring Text Context Framework. It provides facilities of unit and integration testing for the Spring application. Moreover, the Spring Text Context Framework provides specific integration testing functionalities such as context management and caching DI of text pictures and transaction text management with default rollback semantics. Next one is Spring MVC Framework. It allows us to build web applications based on MVC architecture. All the requests made by the user first go through the controller and are then dispatched to different views, that is to different JSP pages or sublet. The form handling and form validating feature of the Spring MVC framework can be easily integrated with all popular view technologies such as ISP, Jasper, Report, Free Marker, and Velocity. Last one is transaction management. It helps in handling transaction management of an application without affecting its code. And this framework provides Java Transaction API for global transaction managed by an application server and local transaction managed by using the JDBC Hibernate and Java data objects or other data access APIs. Also, it enabled the developer to model a wide range of transactions on the basis of Spring declarative and programmatic transaction management. Next one is Spring Web Services. It generates web service endpoint and define based on the Java classes, but it is difficult to manage them in an application. To solve this problem, Spring Web Services provide layers-based approaches that are separately managed by the extensible markup language, passing the technique of reading and manipulating XML. Also, Spring provides effective mapping for transmitting incoming XML message request to an object and a developer to easily distribute XML message object between two machines. Also, JDBC abstraction layer help the user in handling error in an easy and efficient manner. So, the JDBC programming code can be reduced when this abstraction layer is implemented in a web application. And this layer handles exceptions such as driver not found, or all SQL exception are translated into the data access exception classes. Spring data access exception is not JDBC specific, and hence we can say data access object like DAO are not bound to JDBC only. Now, the popular application would provide great benefits of using Spring framework are host, modular, integration with existing framework, testability, WebMVC, central exception handling, lightweight, and transaction management. Now, POSO means plain old Java object model based. Spring enables developer to develop enterprise class application using POSO. So the benefit of using only POSO is that you don't need any AZB container product such as application server, but you have the we can say the option of using only a robust servlet container such as Tomcat or any commercial product. And using modular, so Spring is organized in a modular fashions, even though the number of packages and classes are substantial, and you have to worry only about the ones you need and ignore the rest. Next one is integration with existing framework. So Spring does not reinvent the wheel. Instead, it truly makes use of some of existing technologies like several ORM framework, logging frameworks, JE, Quartz, and JDK timers, and other view technologies. Testability means testing an application written with Spring is simple because environment-dependent code is moved into the framework. Furthermore, by using Java Beans style POSOs, it becomes easier to use dependency injection for injecting test data. WebMVC means Spring framework is a well-designed WebMVC framework which provides a great alternative to web frameworks such as Struts or other over-engineered or less popular web framework. So the next to the central exception handling means provide a convenient API to translate technology specific exception which is thrown by the JDBC, Hibernate or JDO and it accept into consistent and unchecked exception. So as lightweight IOC container tend to be lightweight, especially when compared to AZB container. For example, this is beneficial for developing and deploying application like on computer with limited memory and CPU resources. Next one is transaction management. It provides a consistent transaction management interface that can scale down to a local transaction using a single database and scale up to global transaction using JTA. Now, most thing is dependency injection. So dependency injection is a concept in which object get other required object from outside. So DI can be implemented in any programming language. So basically the general concept behind dependency injection is called inversion of control. So a Java class has a dependency on another class, as we know. So if it is using an instance of this class, we call this is a class dependency. For example, we can say a class which accesses a logger service has a dependency on this service classes. So ideally, Java class should be as independent as possible from another Java class. So it increases the possibility of reusing these classes and to be able to test them independently from other classes. So if the Java class creates an instance of another class via the new operator, it can't be used and tested independently from this class, and this is called a hard dependency. So a framework class, usually called a dependency container, it could analyze the dependency of this class. With this analysis, it is able to create an instance of this class and inject the object into the defined dependency via Java reflection. So this way the Java class has no hard dependency, which means it does not rely on an instance of a certain class. This allows you to test your class in isolation. Now, what are design patterns? So the design pattern are an essential part of software development. So these solutions not only solve recurring problem but also help developer understand the design of a framework by recognizing common patterns. So the four most common design pattern are, which we use in Spring Framework, are singleton, factory method, proxy, and template. What are the singleton patterns? So the singleton pattern is a mechanism that ensures only one instance of an object exists per application. This pattern can be useful when managing shared resources or providing cross. So the singleton means, what a singleton means. So generally a singleton is a globally unique for an application, but in Spring this constraint is relaxed. Instead, Spring restricts a singleton to one object per Spring IOC container. This means Spring will only create one bean for each type per application context. Now the auto-wide singletons, we can create two controllers within a single application context and inject a bean of the same type into each. Next one is factory method pattern. So the factory method pattern requires a factory class with an abstract for creating the desired object. Often we want to create different object based on a particular context. For example, our application may require a vehicle object in a marine environment. We want to create boats, but in an aerospace environment, we want to create airplanes. Next one is proxy pattern. So the proxies are a handy tool in our digital world, and we use often them outside of the software, such as network proxies. So in code, the proxy pattern is a technique that allows one object, the proxy, and to control access to another object, the subject or service. So we have client and we have interface. So in interface, we can do real subject or proxy by do any something. So next one is template survey method. So in many framework, a standard template are predefined for writing the codes. For example, when executing a query on a database, the same series of steps must be completed. First one is establish a connection. Second one is executing query, perform cleanup, and close the connection. So these steps are basically the ideal scenario for the template method pattern.